In the corporate courtroom, CEO Richardson was pinning all the blame on his beautiful assistant, Elena. She's just a naive secretary who believes everything she's told. The lawyers made the same defense, until General Martinez entered the courtroom and revealed that Elena was actually Lieutenant Colonel Elena Vasquez, Army Intelligence. Welcome to Storyline Universe. Global Tech Industries, downtown Manhattan, 3 years earlier. Elena Vasquez had perfected the art of being invisible in plain sight. At 29, she was strikingly beautiful with long dark hair, expressive brown eyes, and the kind of smile that made people want to trust her. To everyone at Global Tech, she was Elena Martinez, the efficient, friendly executive assistant to CEO Richard Richardson. She arrived at the office each morning at 7:30 a.m., dressed professionally but not ostentatiously. She organized Richardson's calendar, managed his correspondence, and seemed to genuinely care about making his life easier. She was polite to everyone, from the janitors to the board members, and had earned a reputation as someone who was both competent and completely harmless. "Elena, sweetheart," Richardson would say in meetings, his voice dripping with condescension. "Could you get us some coffee? The men are talking business." Elena would smile graciously and comply, even when the men were discussing multi-million-dollar deals that she understood better than most of them. Because Elena Vasquez wasn't really a secretary at all. She was Lieutenant Colonel Elena Vasquez, U.S. Army Military Intelligence, with 15 years of experience in deep cover operations. She had infiltrated terrorist cells in Afghanistan, exposed corruption in defense contracting, and dismantled international money laundering operations. Her mission at Global Tech was to investigate suspected ties between the company and terrorist financing networks. The FBI had identified patterns suggesting that Richardson's company was being used to move money for hostile foreign organizations, but they needed someone on the inside to gather evidence. Elena had been the perfect choice. Her background in financial intelligence, combined with her ability to blend into corporate environments, made her ideal for long-term undercover work. For 3 years, she had played the role of the devoted assistant while secretly documenting Richardson's illegal activities. She had access to his computer, his files, his phone calls, and his private meetings. Piece by piece, she had built an airtight case against him and his co-conspirators. But Richardson had finally become suspicious. Not of Elena, he still saw her as harmless eye candy, but of federal investigators closing in on his operation. He needed a scapegoat, someone to take the fall for his crimes. He had chosen Elena. The first sign of trouble came on a Wednesday morning when FBI agents raided Global Tech's offices. Elena watched from Richardson's office as federal investigators seized computers, filed cabinets, and financial records. "Elena," Richardson said, his voice tense but controlled, "I need you to do something very important for me." He handed her a flash drive. "This contains backup files for our overseas operations. I need you to take it home and keep it safe. Can you do that for me?" Elena knew immediately that this was the setup. The flash drive undoubtedly contained incriminating evidence that Richardson wanted to plant in her possession. When investigators found it, it would appear that the naive secretary had been manipulated into storing illegal files. "Of course, Mr. Richardson," Elena replied with perfect innocence. "I'll keep it safe." She took the flash drive, knowing that her handler at Military Intelligence would be very interested in its contents. But she also knew that Richardson was preparing to destroy her cover and ruin her life to save himself. 2 days later, the FBI arrested Elena at her apartment. The search warrant specifically mentioned the flash drive, and they found it exactly where Richardson had told them it would be, in her bedroom dresser. The media portrayed it as they always did. Naive young woman manipulated by powerful older man. Elena's photographs appeared on news websites with captions like "Secretary Caught in Corporate Scandal" and "Beautiful Assistant Falls for CEO's Lies." Richardson played his part perfectly, expressing shock and disappointment at Elena's betrayal. He told reporters, "I trusted her completely. I had no idea she was involved in anything illegal." Elena said nothing. Her orders were clear: maintain cover at all costs, even if it meant facing criminal charges. The intelligence she had gathered was too valuable to compromise by revealing her true identity prematurely. But as she sat in federal custody, Elena wondered if her superiors would abandon her to protect the operation. Deep cover agents had been sacrificed before when the stakes were high enough. She was about to find out. Federal District Courthouse, Southern District of New York, 6 months later. The trial of Richardson and his co-conspirators had become a media sensation. The case involved over $200 million in illegal transactions, connections to 3 different terrorist organizations, and enough corruption to bring down a dozen other companies. Elena sat at the defendant's table, looking every inch the part Richardson had cast her in. The innocent secretary who had been manipulated by a master criminal. Her lawyer, a public defender named James Park, was competent but overwhelmed by the complexity of the case. The prosecution strategy was straightforward. Richardson and his associates were the masterminds. Elena was a victim who had been used and discarded. It should have been an easy case to make, but Richardson's defense team, led by the expensive law firm of Morrison, Kent & Associates, had a different narrative. They portrayed Elena as the real mastermind, a manipulative woman who had used her beauty and apparent innocence to gain access to confidential information that she then sold to foreign interests. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Richardson's lead attorney, Margaret Morrison, said in her opening statement, "my client is also a victim here. He was seduced and manipulated by a woman who used her feminine wiles to gain his trust and access to his company's most sensitive information." Elena watched Morrison's performance with professional admiration. The woman was very good at her job, even if she was defending a terrorist financier. "Look at the defendant," Morrison continued, gesturing toward Elena. "Beautiful, charming, seemingly innocent. The perfect spy. She spent 3 years gaining my client's trust, learning his business, and ultimately betraying everything he stood for." The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney David Chen, objected. "Your Honor, there's no evidence that Ms. Martinez was anything other than an employee who was used by her boss." "Sustained," Judge Patricia Williams ruled. "Counsel will stick to the evidence." But the damage was done. Morrison had planted the seed that Elena was more than she appeared to be. The problem was that Morrison didn't know how right she was. Elena's own attorney, James Park, was doing his best with a bad situation. "Elena Martinez is a victim," he told the jury during his opening. "She's a young woman who trusted her employer and was betrayed by that trust. She believed she was doing legitimate work for a legitimate company. It was a good defense, as far as it went. But Elena knew that Richardson's team had prepared something that would make it impossible to maintain. She was right. On the 3rd day of testimony, Richardson took the stand in his own defense. At 58, he was silver-haired, well-dressed, and projecting the confident demeanor of someone who had spent his life convincing people to trust him with their money. "Mr. Richardson," Morrison began, "please tell the jury about your relationship with the defendant, Elena Martinez." "Elena was my executive assistant for 3 years, Richardson replied, his voice carrying just the right note of regret. "I trusted her completely. She had access to my calendar, my correspondence, my private files. I treated her like family. Did you have any reason to suspect that she might be involved in illegal activities?" "None whatsoever. Elena seemed so innocent, so genuine. She was always eager to help, always asking questions about the business. I thought she was just ambitious, trying to learn." Morrison nodded sympathetically. What do you think now, looking back? Richardson's expression hardened slightly. I think Elena Martinez is a very dangerous woman who uses her appearance to manipulate men. She's not the innocent secretary she pretends to be. Elena watched this performance with professional detachment. Richardson was good at this, selling the narrative that she was the manipulator while he was the victim. Mr. Richardson, Morrison continued, the prosecution claims that you were the mastermind of this operation. How do you respond to that? It's ridiculous, Richardson said firmly. Elena had access to all the files, all the transactions, all the communications. She's the one who set up the overseas accounts. She's the one who made contact with foreign operatives. I was just signing papers she put in front of me. It was a masterful deflection. Richardson was admitting to negligence while denying criminal intent and pinning the actual crimes on Elena. In your opinion, Morrison asked, what kind of person could orchestrate such a complex operation? Richardson looked directly at Elena. Someone with specialized training. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Elena Martinez is not what she appears to be. Elena felt a chill. Richardson was dancing dangerously close to the truth, even if he didn't know it. If he kept pushing this line of reasoning, he might accidentally expose her real identity before she was ready. That's when her handler's words echoed in her mind. Maintain cover at all costs, even if it means going to prison. Elena prepared herself for the possibility that she might spend the next 20 years in federal prison to protect a classified operation. But then, something unexpected happened. During a recess in Richardson's testimony, Elena noticed unusual activity in the hallway outside the courtroom. Men and women in military dress uniforms were gathering, along with what appeared to be federal agents and Pentagon officials. Elena's attorney, James Park, was also watching the commotion with confusion. "Do you have any idea what's going on?" he asked her. "No," Elena lied smoothly, but she had a growing suspicion about what was happening. When court resumed, Judge Williams appeared to have received some kind of communication that had clearly surprised her. She conferred briefly with the bailiff, then addressed the courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with Mr. Richardson's testimony, the court has received a request from the United States Department of Defense to address certain matters related to this case." Morrison immediately objected. "Your Honor, the Defense Department has no standing in this civilian criminal matter." "Actually, Counselor," a new voice said from the back of the courtroom, "we do." Elena turned to see a man in his 50s entering the courtroom, wearing the dress uniform of a U.S. Army general. His bearing was unmistakably military, and the decorations on his chest indicated extensive combat experience and high-level responsibility. The man approached the bench. "Your Honor, I am General Robert Martinez, Deputy Director of Military Intelligence, United States Army. I need to address certain misunderstandings about one of the defendants in this case." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Richardson's face had gone pale, and Morrison was frantically conferring with her legal team. Judge Williams called for order. "General Martinez, this is highly irregular. What exactly is the nature of your business here?" "Your Honor, with respect, I cannot allow false testimony to continue when it compromises ongoing national security operations." Elena felt her heart racing. This was it. The moment when 3 years of deep cover would either be vindicated or destroyed. General Martinez turned to face the courtroom, his gaze settling on Elena. "The defendant, Elena Martinez, is not who you think she is." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, waiting to hear what came next. "Your Honor," General Martinez continued, The woman sitting at the defendant's table is not Elena Martinez, executive assistant. Her real name is Lieutenant Colonel Elena Vasquez, United States Army Military Intelligence. The explosion of noise from the gallery was immediate and overwhelming. Reporters began shouting questions, photographers started taking pictures, and Richardson looked like he was about to have a heart attack. Judge Williams banged her gavel repeatedly. "Order! Order in this court!" General Martinez waited for the noise to subside, then continued. Lieutenant Colonel Vasquez has been conducting a classified deep cover operation for the past 3 years. Her mission was to infiltrate global tech industries and gather evidence of the company's connections to terrorist financing networks. Morrison was on her feet immediately. "Objection, Your Honor, this is completely improper. The Defense Department cannot simply waltz into a civilian courtroom and—" "Miss Morrison," Judge Williams interrupted, her voice carrying new authority. "I think you'll find that national security matters take precedence over normal courtroom procedures. General Martinez, please continue." Elena watched Richardson's face as the reality of the situation became clear to him. For 3 years he had patronized her, condescended to her, and ultimately tried to frame her for his own crimes. Now he was learning that every conversation, every meeting, every illegal transaction had been documented by one of the Army's most experienced intelligence officers. "Lieutenant Colonel Vasquez," General Martinez said, addressing Elena directly, "you are hereby ordered to break cover and resume your true identity." Elena stood, and for the first time in 3 years, allowed her real personality to show. The shy, deferential secretary disappeared, replaced by a confident military officer with 15 years of experience in some of the most dangerous operations the Army conducted. "Yes, sir," Elena replied, her voice carrying military precision. General Martinez turned back to Judge Williams. "Your Honor, Lieutenant Colonel Vasquez has been operating under direct orders from the Pentagon. Every action she took at Global Tech Industries was part of an authorized military intelligence operation. She is not a criminal. She is a decorated officer who has been serving her country." Richardson found his voice. "This is impossible. Elena's just a secretary. She can't be—" "Mr. Richardson," Elena interrupted, her tone now carrying unmistakable authority. "I have recordings of every illegal conversation you've had for the past 3 years. I have documentation of every fraudulent transaction, every contact with terrorist organizations, every attempt to launder money through your company." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device. "Including the conversation where you tried to frame me by planting evidence in my apartment." Morrison was staring at Elena like she was seeing a ghost. "This is entrapment. This is illegal surveillance. This whole operation is completely legal," General Martinez interrupted. "Lieutenant Colonel Vasquez was investigating suspected terrorist financing, which falls under national security exceptions to normal law enforcement procedures." Elena looked at Richardson, who was now slumped in his chair, finally understanding that he had been outplayed from the very beginning. "You were right about one thing, Mr. Richardson," Elena said quietly. "I'm not what I appear to be, but you're wrong about everything else. I'm not a criminal. I'm the person who's going to make sure you never finance terrorism again." What followed was one of the most dramatic evidence presentations in federal court history. Lieutenant Colonel Vasquez, now testifying in her true identity, systematically dismantled Richardson's entire operation. She presented audio recordings of Richardson discussing transactions with known terrorist financiers. She provided bank records showing the exact flow of money from legitimate businesses to extremist organizations. She offered email communications that proved Richardson's full knowledge of and participation in the illegal activities. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she said during her testimony, "for 3 years, I documented every aspect of Mr. Richardson's criminal enterprise. This was not a case of an innocent man being led astray by a manipulative woman. This was a deliberate, sophisticated operation to fund terrorist activities using American financial institutions." Elena's transformation from secretary to intelligence officer was mesmerizing to watch. She spoke with authority about complex financial instruments, terrorist organization structures, and international money laundering techniques. This was clearly someone with extensive training and experience in exactly these types of operations. Colonel Vasquez, the prosecutor asked, "Can you explain to the jury what your qualifications are for conducting this type of investigation?" "I have a master's degree in international finance from Georgetown University and a doctorate in counterterrorism studies from the War College. I've conducted deep cover operations in 12 different countries, including 18 months infiltrating a terrorist cell in Afghanistan. I'm fluent in 6 languages and have specialized training in financial crimes investigation." The contrast with the naive secretary persona she had maintained for 3 years was stunning. Richardson's attorney, Morrison, tried to attack Elena's credibility during cross-examination. "Colonel Vasquez, isn't it true that you've been lying to everyone for 3 years? How can the jury trust anything you say?" "Miss Morrison," Elena replied calmly, "lying to criminals as part of an authorized intelligence operation is not the same as perjury in a court of law. Every statement I'm making today is under oath and subject to verification. But you deceived my client. I conducted a lawful investigation of suspected terrorist financing. Your client deceived himself into believing that I was too stupid to understand what he was doing." The exchange highlighted the fundamental problem with Richardson's defense. He had underestimated Elena because of her appearance and gender, and that underestimation had allowed her to gather evidence that would now convict him. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous on all counts: guilty. Richardson was sentenced to 35 years in federal prison. His co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 15 to 25 years. The terrorist financing network that Elena had infiltrated was completely dismantled, preventing an estimated $500 million from reaching extremist organizations. But the real victory was the precedent set for future operations. Elena's successful deep cover mission proved that military intelligence could effectively infiltrate corporate criminal networks, opening new avenues for preventing terrorist financing. After the sentencing, General Martinez held a brief press conference outside the courthouse. "Lieutenant Colonel Vasquez's operation represents the best of American military intelligence," he said. "For 3 years, she sacrificed her personal life and risked her safety to protect our national security. Her professionalism, dedication, and courage exemplify the highest standards of military service." A reporter asked, "General, what's next for Colonel Vasquez?" "That's classified," Martinez replied with a slight smile. "But I can tell you that the Army has many important missions that require her particular expertise." Elena herself gave no interviews and made no public statements. She had already disappeared back into the classified world of military intelligence, where her next mission was waiting. 6 months after the trial, a profile of Lieutenant Colonel Elena Vasquez appeared in Military Intelligence Quarterly, a classified publication that circulated among defense and intelligence professionals. The article, titled "Deep Cover: Lessons from the Global Tech Operation," analyzed the tactical and strategic aspects of Elena's mission. It noted that her success had led to new protocols for corporate infiltration and had resulted in the disruption of 12 other terrorist financing networks. But the article also addressed the personal cost of such operations. Lieutenant Colonel Vasquez spent 3 years living a completely fabricated identity. She could not contact her family, maintain real friendships, or pursue romantic relationships. She endured daily condescension and sexism while documenting crimes that could have resulted in mass casualties. Her sacrifice exemplifies the dedication required for successful deep cover operations. Elena was promoted to full colonel and assigned to lead a new unit specializing in corporate intelligence operations. Her methods became the standard for financial crimes investigation within the intelligence community. Richardson's conviction made headlines worldwide and sent a message to other executives who might be tempted to work with terrorist organizations. The case demonstrated that the U.S. military could and would infiltrate any organization suspected of supporting terrorism, regardless of how legitimate it appeared on the surface. But perhaps the most important impact was on the perception of women in intelligence work. Elena's operation proved that female officers could successfully conduct long-term deep-cover missions in male-dominated environments, leading to expanded opportunities for women throughout the intelligence community. 3 years later, Colonel Elena Vasquez was working on her next classified mission when she received an unexpected visitor at the Pentagon. James Park, her former public defender, had requested a meeting. Elena agreed to see him, curious about what had brought him to military intelligence headquarters. "Colonel Vasquez," Park said when they met in a secure conference room, "I wanted to thank you for something." "Thank me? For what?" "For teaching me never to underestimate my clients," Park replied. "After your case, I started looking more carefully at the people I was representing. I discovered that several of them had backgrounds and stories that weren't apparent on the surface." Elena smiled. "That's good advice for any attorney." "It's also good advice for anyone," Park continued. "The Richardson case taught me that appearances can be deceiving, that people are often much more complex than they seem, and that underestimating someone based on stereotypes can be a serious mistake." Park paused, then added, "I also wanted to tell you that I've started a scholarship fund for women pursuing careers in law enforcement and intelligence. It's called the Elena Vasquez Foundation for Women in National Security." Elena was genuinely touched. "Mr. Park, that's very generous, but it's not necessary." "Actually, it is necessary," Park insisted. "Your operation saved lives and protected national security, but it also demonstrated something important about the capabilities of women in these fields. The next generation of female intelligence officers deserves to know that story." As Elena walked Park to the building exit, she reflected on the unexpected ways that her deep cover mission continued to have impact. She had started the operation focused solely on catching terrorists and their financiers, but the mission had also advanced women's opportunities in intelligence work, educated the public about the reality of modern military operations, and demonstrated that assumptions based on appearance could be dangerously wrong. Colonel Elena Vasquez returned to her office and her classified files, knowing that somewhere another young woman was being inspired to pursue a career in military intelligence, and that the next generation of terrorists would face opponents they would never see coming. Because in the world of military intelligence, the most effective weapons are often the ones that don't look dangerous at all. So now I ask you, have you ever been underestimated because of your appearance? Have you witnessed someone being dismissed because they didn't fit expected stereotypes? How can we learn to look beyond surface impressions? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe, because here at Storyline Universe, we believe that the most powerful people are often the ones who are hiding in plain sight, and that judging others by appearances is one of the most dangerous mistakes we can make.